All right, so my name is Jocelyn Ramirez. I am the chef and founder of Todo Verde. I started back in 2015 because I really wanted to create more access to healthy plant-based dishes that I grew up eating. At the time as I was considering plant-based foods, there weren't a lot of options for me unless I just wanted to eat rice and beans for the rest of my life. So I, decided to start to work on the dishes that my family had made for generations and try to figure out ways to tweak them here and there, what other ingredients I can incorporate to make them more plant-based. And in the process, I've found a few wholesome ingredients that I tend to work with most, which obviously are jackfruit, which is featured a couple times in my cookbook, which I'll show you in a moment. I love using mushrooms because who doesn't love mushrooms? Yay, I see the cookbook there. I use tempeh, sometimes tofu, but things that are just as low on the spectrum of processing as possible. But obviously there are on the market so many other plant-based alternatives that you can continue to explore, especially if plant-based eating is new to your life and you were used to eating a pretty predominantly meat-centered diet, then explore what else is out there. And I hope that plant-based could be a part of all of our regular lifestyles, just so that we can all be well, live well, and share that with our family and friends. So the recipe that I'm going to be going over today, obviously, is the jackfruit al pastor, which I have open up here, and it's on page 61 if you happen to have a book. And I released La Vida Verde back in April. It feels like so long ago. And it was really, for me, an opportunity to continue to share the work that we had been doing with Todo Verde here in Los Angeles on a broader scale, because a lot of people love our food and they wanted to learn how to make it at home. And really, I feel like that's where it's most impactful. It's not about me cooking at a catering event or anything like that to provide that dish, but can this jackfruit al pastor dish become a part of your family gatherings on a regular basis where you're cooking it on your own? For me, that was like the most important thing. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the process of how I break down jackfruit and the things that I'm going to be using to season it. And all the recipes in the book were meant to be fairly easy so that it didn't feel too intimidating to be able to take on this recipe, especially because not a lot of people cook al pastor at home. And then on top of that, jackfruit also may be a new ingredient that you're working with. So I wanted to make sure that it felt like, okay, this is easy. And, in essence, what it is a foundation so that you can go on to use something like jackfruit in a variety of different dishes. It doesn't necessarily have to be Mexican cuisine like what I'm offering today. It could be any type of cuisine that uses like chicken or pork as an alternative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about jackfruit first, and then I'm going to get into the ingredients a little bit more. Obviously, this is an ingredient too, I should say, but I have here some jackfruit that I already worked a little bit, but I have some pieces that I didn't break down just yet so that I can show you. But jackfruit is this really interesting ingredient if you haven't worked with it before, in that it is a blank canvas that looks so much like a shreddy meat when it's cooked, like a shredded chicken or pork. And I purchased young green jackfruit. So you can find a whole fresh jackfruit here in the US if you're based. I think everyone here is probably based in the US. But because it's grown in tropical areas like Thailand, India, Mexico, by the time it gets imported here in the States, it's typically already ripe. And so I've had people send pictures, like DMs to us, and they're like, I bought a whole jackfruit because I didn't want to use canned. It's not really going to quite work for these recipes because there's already sugars that have developed in the jackfruit. So it's going to be a very sweet dish. I have had people make the al pastor with a sweet jackfruit, and it worked, but I just didn't have them use any of the pineapple juice or the apple juice because it's too much sweet on sweet. So I had them go really savory, and it worked, but it's still not the ideal situation. So you want something that's called young green jackfruit. It could be purchased canned in a vacuum sealed pouch. sometimes in jars. You can find it at local health food stores, or if you're near an Asian market, they also sell it canned at Asian markets. But I don't recommend buying a whole jackfruit unless you're absolutely sure that it's still young green. And it's going to be really hard to break into, but maybe you can, you know, because it's young green, it's still like really hard. And so that's typically broken down in a facility that has the capacity to break those down. And so you'll notice here that the jackfruit has this like top shreddy part that I kind of was able to easily break open or shred with my fingers. And then from this point down, it has this, what I call the core. And even if I try to, you know, like shred this, it doesn't. It's a little bit tender to the touch, but it's firm enough where it's not going to easily shred. But this tastes just like this. It just doesn't look the same. You know, if you cut this off, it's going to be like this huge chunk that even if you used it, you would like season only the outside, and then you'd bite into it and it'd be like a very neutral, flavorless jackfruit core. So what I like to do is mince this up with either a food processor or a knife. And I'll show you how I do that right now. And then there's also these seed pods, typically in this like top shreddy area, shreddy for the lack of a better term here. And so you'll see as I break these down that these seed pods will come out. And I also like to, like, here's half of one, but I like to use a knife to also break down these seed pods, mostly because it's a textural thing. It's two things, and let me show you here what that looks like. So before I show you what that looks like, here are my, you know, I have 4 pieces here that I haven't broken down yet. So what you do is you open the can, it's usually gonna be in a brine, and then you're gonna put it in a strainer. You're gonna strain all of that liquid out and just catch your jackfruit, and then give it a really good rinse. And if you wanted to get more of the brine out, you could squeeze out some of the liquid and then add your squeezed jackfruit to a container with more water and let it sit for a couple hours in the fridge and let that water continue to seep out some of that brine. And so that'll give you, but pretty much if you squeeze most of the liquid out and season it really well, you really won't be able to taste too much of the brine, but sometimes people can. I think it's because it's not squeezed. Like I've seen people like literally open this, rinse it, and then they just throw it into a saute pan and start using the back of a spoon to like try to smash it. I don't recommend that because you're not going to get like as much flavor into all the elements, and you really need to squeeze that brine out. So I'm just going to grab, I forgot to get a little bowl for myself here. All right. So I have a bowl here, and all I'm going to do, this is what you would do in your strainer. I'm just showing you here because I don't want to take you over to my sink, but all you would do is just look at all that liquid coming out. Just hand squeeze, or you can use a cheesecloth. You can use a nut milk bag and just squeeze as much of the liquid out as you can. It doesn't have to be bone dry, but just enough where you know that you're going to be able to get this to a point where everything that you add to it, the jackfruit will be able to absorb a lot better rather than like oozing out all this liquid that it has in it. So check it out, just these 4 pieces of jackfruit have at least like a 1/4 cup of liquid that they were in. So, you know, you want to be able to try to get as much of that liquid out. And I'm just going to get rid of this bowl. So you would do that for your 3 cans of jackfruit. And then once you do that, I'll show you how I break it down. I just want to make sure I can see here. There we go. So you're going to create 3 piles essentially. So you have your pile that still needs to be broken down. And what I like to do is and you can see how much just squeezing it has already started to break it down. So I just like to remove this core, which is that weird triangular core, right? That doesn't look like meat. And I'll make a pile of that. And I'll check this top shreddy bit and see if it has any seeds. This one's actually pretty good to go. You can see that it already has a little bit of that meat texture, and that's my ready to go pile. And then I'll just go through the rest of these pieces here. Here's another piece. I'll find where the core is. I'll cut that off, and then I'll just squeeze and see this one does reveal that it has a few seed pods. And I like to take this out mostly because, you know, meat doesn't look like it has these like bolitas, these seed pods in there. And so I'm trying to really emulate like this texture of meat that will almost fool friends and family into thinking that it's actually meat. But if it has this in there, they're gonna be like, what is that? That's not meat, that's something else. Sometimes the seed pods are really big. These are actually pretty small, but sometimes they're actually pretty huge. This one's kind of on the medium side. And so that will go into that pile. Double check here, that's ready to go. Cut that core off, squeeze for any seed pods. Put that in the pile that needs to get minced up. So this pile here is ready to go in my bowl. I'm just gonna grab it and put it into the bowl. I already prepped most of the jackfruit. I just wanted to have enough here to show you what that process looks like. I'm gonna bring my pile of the cores and the seed pods that don't look very much like meat, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just run my knife through them. So if you have a food processor, you can do this a lot faster, where you can just put this all into a food processor. This is what we do at Todo Verde's kitchen. We have an industrial sized food processor, and we just break down all the cores and the seed pods, because this is not waste. I've seen so many people throw this away, but you're just wasting food and also money, because this tastes just like the rest of the jackfruit. And so all you need to do is just break it down a little bit. And it's not like a specific, you know, shape or size that I'm looking for. It's just like a rough mince till I get the big pieces broken down enough where it kind of looks similar in size to the other pieces of the jackfruit that shred really easily. So this is just about there, but I just want to get it down to a point where it's not going to be this big chunk that doesn't get seasoned in the center and is pretty bland still when somebody bites into it. I want to make sure that my seasoning gets into all the little, every little bite is like seasoned really well. And so this is kind of the texture that I like to go for. You can mince it up further. My food processor actually minces it really small, which is fine. Your jackfruit just has a slightly different texture and it gets minced up really, really tiny. And actually I see here that some of the bits that I did earlier are still kind of big. So I'll just do that really quickly, give that a nice rough chop, making sure that your fingers are out of the way. I know sometimes people try to like grab each piece and do this. If you do that, make sure you bear claw your fingers, but you can just put your fingers on top of the blade and run it through. So I have here my jackfruit, and you can see here that the tops of the jackfruit, or the shreddy bits as I call them, are still kind of a chunk. And so I also want to use my fingers to just break that down even further. So I want to break it down until they're small little pieces. You'll still find some as you're cooking it in your skillet or saute pan, and you can break that down with the back of a spoon. But I try to do as much of this beforehand so that my seasoning coats every little last bit of the jackfruit. So just going in and making sure I'm breaking it down as much as possible. It's really soft, so you're not really, this isn't a hard task. Like notice this, right? That could get seasoned with our al pastor seasoning, and then you bite into the middle and it's like, there's no flavor. So you want to get all your flavor in every little piece. So I think this is just about there. And again, I'm probably missing a piece or two, but it's fine because I'll be able to grab it when it's cooking. But I like to do some of it beforehand, so it's mostly done. And it's easier, honestly, to do this with your fingers than trying to use the back of a spoon or a spatula to do like one piece at a time in your pan. All right. Here's a big seed pod, which is fine. I'll be able to break this down on my finger, but it looks like I just cut that one in half, but it was like a bigger seed pod. So, you know, you just want to break that down so that it doesn't look like an odd shape in your jackfruit. And this is the jackfruit that I minced up earlier. So once it gets all mixed together, it really starts to blend into each other. And so this is going to be ready to go with my seasoning. And let me show you how we're gonna get this all flavored up. Let me give my hands a quick rinse. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'm just gonna set my jackfruit aside for a moment and show you all these other ingredients that are going into the dish. So I have here, an FYI, I have a skillet. If you're cooking along and you're close to wrapping up, breaking down your jackfruit, I have a skillet that's preheating so that it's nice and hot when you're ready to throw your jackfruit in. So I have here achiote paste that I'm gonna be using for the dish. And I wanna talk a little bit about achiote. It's the paste made out of annatto seeds or annatto seeds. And the one that I'm using as a paste is this one here, which we have available in the meal kits that we are selling, like the starter packs. And it is annatto seeds that have been ground up with a series of different ingredients, everything from, you know, it has cornmeal that holds it together, but it has garlic and chiles and spices and vinegar that all bind it together. And I really like this one because the flavor provides like a kind of a sweet note, but it also is very savory. It's like this nice delicate balance, and you can definitely smell a little bit of the garlic and the chiles in there. It's not spicy, even though it's red like chiles, it's not spicy. So just FYI, don't feel like, you know, oh my gosh, the recipe calls for 3.5 tablespoons, but I should only add 1 because it's spicy. It's not spicy. It's more of a flavor point. And I have here a friend of mine, she brought me some annatto seeds from a farm that her family owns. And these are the actual seeds. I still have some jackfruit on my hands. And so these little seeds here, you know, if you ate one of these seeds, what you taste is earth, is what I like to describe it as. It's a very earthy flavor, which is why the paste includes chiles and garlic and all these other things. You know, it provides a very grounding earth-like flavor. It reminds me of, like, you know, it's almost like a cousin of amaranth or something like that. With amaranth also being, you know, a very, it could be a bright red color and very earthy. It's not spicy at all. Back in the day, our ancestors mostly used this for food, but also as a coloring. So if you see, you know, the Mayan pyramids or pyramids across Mexico, any of the red that you see was typically colored by using crushed annatto seeds, creating a paste or a paint. And so I have a ton of these. If I were to use these seeds, if I didn't have this paste available, then I would likely, you know, use a spice grinder or my Vitamix to break it down into a paste. And you could add the garlic and chiles and other ingredients to make your own paste. Although you'd have to do quite a bit of it, you know, just to make it, like if I'm using my Vitamix, for example, I probably have to use at least like half a cup or if not more of this to be able to grind it to a point where it becomes a paste, and that you can probably store in your refrigerator for a few weeks or so. So these are the actual annatto seeds, which you could find, but more easily available is the paste itself, mostly at Mexican grocery stores. And in the back of the cookbook, if you have the cookbook, there is a list of online resources where you could purchase the ingredients online and get it shipped directly to you. The other ingredients that I'm using here is I have pineapple juice and orange juice that I squeezed from an orange. The pineapple I did purchase, and you can see some of the oil here because I use the same measuring cup that I did for the oil. But this is a 1/4 cup of pineapple juice and a 1/4 cup of orange juice. So I purchased the pineapple juice. I freshly squeezed the orange juice. If you didn't have the pineapple juice, but you bought a pineapple, I've also made this dish by just blending a chunk of pineapple that I didn't measure, but I kind of like eyeballed, like, oh, okay, by the time that blends, that's probably going to be about a 1/4 cup or so of juice. You know, it's going to be obviously a thicker juice, but you can definitely do that if you can't find the pineapple juice to purchase already made. And I do have here a pineapple that I'll show you in a moment how I break down. And it's kind of flat on the top because I had it flipped over so that the sugars can move down to the top, because usually it ripens on the bottom first. And I had it in a windowsill, so it was getting a little bit of sunlight. But whenever you're purchasing a pineapple, I know that we love to get fruit that looks super beautiful and like, you know, that doesn't have any like damaging looking areas to it or anything that's overripe. But a pineapple is an exception. Like pineapple and papayas are things that you kind of want to buy ugly, meaning like there's already some wilting. Sometimes it looks like it's almost molding at the bottom. The leaves look super dried out and funky. This is a pineapple that I'm looking for at the store if I'm ready to eat it. And you want to look for a little bit of the golden color starting to come through. Like here, this one isn't all the way ripe yet, but I'm still going to use it. But here you can see that it's still very green. And so the sugars haven't fully developed there. But there are some pieces here that I'll be able to use for this dish, and I'll still make it work. It's totally fine if yours still has a little bit of green to it, but you want to try to find one that's a little bit more ripe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend my achiote paste with my orange juice and my pineapple juice really quickly. I like to do the oil separate just because it's then easier to clean your blender, but you could just throw everything in here. And I'll share what the other seasoning is that we're going to be adding to the jackfruit. So I have my 3.5 tablespoons of achiote paste, a 1/4 cup of orange juice, a 1/4 cup of pineapple juice. I'm going to give that a quick blend. And it doesn't take very long. Really what you're trying to do here is just break down the achiote. So if you don't blend, what could happen is you can have a few chunks of achiote that are still clumped in your jackfruit. And when you take a bite, you're gonna have like this big mouthful of achiote paste, which you don't want. Achiote paste is delicious, but you don't want that in your dish. You wanna be able to create a little bit of a balance. So I'm just gonna grab a spatula here, and I'm just gonna clean my tamper, because I am like always trying to get every little last bit of my food into the dish. And I'll go ahead and throw this into the sink. And I'm just gonna pour this achiote paste into my jackfruit.
Hey,
You can see that nice bright color. Yeah, go ahead.
2 questions. Do you mind showing us the package of the achiote paste again? And can you use a food processor instead of a blender for this step?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'll show you the package in just a moment. Let me just scrape this down. And then I would recommend using a blender versus a food processor, because sometimes food processors aren't the best with liquids. But if yours is, then by all means, yeah, go ahead. But if yours starts to like have some of the liquids spill out, because food processors are mostly meant for chopping, not blending. But if it works for you in that way, then go ahead. But you can see it's like pretty liquidy, and so you don't want any of that to fall out and get all over the place. So I got every little last bit of my achiote mixture out of the blender, and then this is the box of the achiote paste that I'm using. And actually, I don't think I showed you what it looks like inside. So let me go ahead and do that. So it comes in this plastic. It's like a little brick of achiote paste, and it's a little dense, but it's also like, you can see how I'm able to easily crush it with my fingers. And so that's why it's so easy to just break it down in the blender, just so that you don't have any big chunks, and you just need a little bit of liquid to do that. And so I love using this particular achiote paste. Sometimes you can find achiote powder or different forms of it. So, you know, whatever you're able to find, you can work on, you know, incorporating that into this dish. And so I also have, oh, go ahead.
Where's the best place to find the paste? Online or in store?
It depends on the store. So if you're near a Mexican grocery store, you're likely going to be able to find achiote paste, although I can't guarantee that it's going to be this particular brand that I'm using. But you can also find this paste online. You can just even, you know, this one's called La Perla. It's called Del Maya Bee, you know, which is interesting because I mentioned, you know, Mayan communities use achiote as a coloring for painting and a series of other things. So you can just Google this and see what store carries it. I believe Mex Grocer, which is one of their online resources that's listed in the back of the book, likely has it available for sale online. So I have my jackfruit with the achiote mixture that has the pineapple juice and the orange juice. I have here some oil that I'm going to be using. It's a half a cup, and I'm using your grapeseed oil. This is what I like to use for cooking at home. You could use a vegetable oil that you have on hand. For Todo Verde, we use organic rice bran oil, which isn't as readily available in stores just yet. We buy like a huge container of it. If you have olive oil, you can definitely use that, although I recommend using like a regular olive oil if it's not as expensive as an extra virgin olive oil, which has little particles in it that burn a lot easier at high temperatures, and so it has a lower smoke point. And we're going to be cooking this at a medium temperature for about 20-25 minutes. I like to use extra virgin olive oil mostly for cold dishes, and then I turn to my grapeseed oil for cooking. But sometimes I do use olive oil. Like if I run out of grapeseed, I will use olive oil for cooking. But I just prefer this because it's a little bit less expensive and it has a higher smoke point. It's more meant for cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and add my half a cup here. I'm going to use my spatula to scrape it out. And it may seem like quite a bit of oil, but the reason I need to add that little bit of oil here is because jackfruit is a fruit. So, you know, it's not like pork or chicken that already has fat content to it. You know, jackfruit doesn't have any of that. And so you need to be able to provide some of that fat content, that moisture to it. And obviously this plant-based oil is very different than an animal-based fat in that it's a lot better for you. I also have here for seasoning, I have 2 tablespoons of ground cumin. I have a half of a teaspoon here of crushed red pepper flakes. You could use chile de árbol if you wanted it to be a little bit spicier. And if you have that on hand and not these red pepper flakes. And then I just have a little bit of some cracked black pepper here. And then I'm using pink Himalayan salt that I have on hand. If you have a table salt or kosher salt, the salt amount will vary depending on how salty your salt is. Pink Himalayan is very low on the salty point, so I'm going to add quite a bit of it. And then you can always taste it too. So remember, this is jackfruit, it's a fruit, so you could taste it when it's raw. It's not going to be a problem at all, and you can taste it as it's cooking. So I'm just going to sprinkle all of this seasoning over the top of my jackfruit. And I'm going to add some salt. And then I'm going to use my spatula to mix this all together. And again, I have a skillet on the stove that is preheating and ready to go. Let me actually turn it up slightly because it's on very low heat. There we go. And all I want to do here is work in all that seasoning into every piece of this jackfruit. So I love using a spatula because it scrapes the sides of your bowl and make sure that you're incorporating everything really nicely. And you want to scrape from the outside going in. I like to turn my bowl as I'm mixing. And I also need to make sure that I'm going to the very bottom center and bringing up to the surface any pieces like that that were just hanging out there stuck on the bottom and not getting worked into the rest of the dish. And so this will just take another moment to mix in completely. And if any big chunks come up, you can always try to start breaking those down.
Jocelyn, how much of the red pepper flakes or the chile did you add, and what was the last seasoning you put in?
Yeah, so I added half a teaspoon of the crushed red pepper flakes, and I just added some salt. I have pink Himalayan salt here, and you go based off of however salty your salt is. So, you know, season accordingly, salt to taste is what's listed in the book. And the other thing I was going to mention is, you know, this is a baseline for your al pastor, which is honestly a really delicious one. Sometimes I like to go even more into the seasoning with my al pastor, depending on how much time I have here at home. But you can add a little bit of vinegar. Like sometimes I add a tablespoon or two of apple cider vinegar. I'll roast a couple of chile guajillos, just dry toast them on the skillet that I'm going to cook the jackfruit on. And then you can blend them up with the achiote mixture and the pineapple juice and the orange juice. That'll add a little bit more depth of flavor. So you can continue adding. This is a baseline for you all. And if you have a family recipe of al pastor that you really love, use that same marinade, that same sazon to season your jackfruit. And so, you know, and again, you have to add that little bit of fat content if that's not a part of your family recipe, just because the jackfruit doesn't have that. So I'm going to bring you over to the cutting board that I have set up here on my stove. So you can see the skillet, which is hot. I can feel with my hand that the heat is definitely nice and hot. I'm going to get a nice sizzle here. And I'm just going to bring my jackfruit over, and I'm just going to toss that in there. I like using a cast iron at home. Obviously, you see my comal is also cast iron, but you're welcome to use any type of skillet that you have. My cast iron is also seasoned in that, like, it has a little bit of oil that it's just, you know, it holds all the time, just because I cook only savory foods in here. But if you're using like a stainless steel or something like that, you may need to add more oil if you have some sticking happening. And the jackfruit, if it doesn't have enough oil, the other thing that I've noticed is it starts to kind of dry out on you. So, you know, you could, if you don't want to add more oil, an option is like, you could add a little bit of like veggie broth, although that won't crisp up the jackfruit. You know, it'll kind of saute it a little bit, but it won't make it crispy. Or you could add a little bit more orange juice or pineapple juice, and the sugars and the orange juice and the pineapple juice will help to brown it a little bit more too. And you can see here that my skillet is pretty full, and which means that, you know, this whole top layer here of the jackfruit is not getting hit with the heat the same way that the bottom is. This is on about medium heat. You want to cook it on medium, not too high, because the jackfruit could burn. And you know, jackfruit is something that's really resilient, and that, like, you could put it in here, walk away for a minute or two, come back, mix it. You don't have to be here every second turning it, but you also don't want to leave it too long and that it starts to burn. So you got to keep an eye on it. And what I like to do is just make sure I'm going to the bottom and then trying to turn some of what's on the top onto the hot surface of the bottom. And you can break down any of the chunks of jackfruit that you see are still kind of big in here. And just, like I said, keep an eye on it, making sure that it's cooking. This is going to take at least 20-25 minutes or so to cook. And if you had a bigger, you know, cooking surface, so at Todo Verde in our commercial kitchen space, we cook this on a plancha. And so it goes a bit faster because we're spreading out the jackfruit on a very thin layer across a very hot surface. Whereas here, you know, if I had my plancha or even a comal that's really long, you could definitely do that too. So as this is starting to cook here, I'm gonna break down my pineapple. And the pineapple is something that we'll add towards the end of cooking, just so that you have these like little bits of pineapple that you can bite into in the taco. I also like to use it as a garnish, but I like to have a few pieces that get slightly seared or warmed through towards the end of this cooking process. And again, notice how full this is. And then as it's cooking, it's gonna slowly start to reduce, and like the quantity of jackfruit will look like it's a little bit less. And with this achiote seasoning, you'll start to see that the color turns into like a brick, like a darker brick, like burnt orange. Right now it's still pretty vibrant. It'll start to kind of bring the tone of the color down. And if and you'll be able to see a little bit of browning, not the same way that you see, like, for example, like the jackfruit carnitas that I make. You see the browning pretty clearly. Here, it's a little harder to see because you have this red color that's so vibrant. So I'll bring you back over and I'll break down my pineapple. And so I have this pineapple, like I said, like this area here seems to look pretty ripe. This is probably the side that was facing the sun in my windowsill. And this side still has a little bit of time to go, but it's okay. I could still keep this in the fridge and it'll continue to develop sugars even as it's sitting in the fridge. But what I like to do with my jackfruit is I cut off the top and I make sure that I am revealing this like nice juicy flesh, cut off the bottom. And again, just checking if I need to cut deeper, if that's enough. And then you place it on this flat surface so it's not going to really move too much. You have a nice steady surface. I'm going to put the top and the bottom aside. And then all I'm going to do is go around with my knife. And I'm going to cut off the skin enough to get into like all these like little divots that it has, like these little pieces here that are kind of harder to eat through. And I'm going to slowly go around like a 1/4 inch turn each time and just get a little bit, I kind of cut deep there, but just get in there to cut off the skin of the pineapple. And what you could do, I'm actually going to keep this skin because I've been wanting to make the bache, which is like a fermented pineapple skin drink. I'm going to use like the core that I'm going to cut out and the skins. Check it out. If it comes out well, I'll share it on Instagram. But I love tepache. I just don't make it super often. I love tejuino, tepache. It's like all our fermented drinks of Mexico. And so essentially what you would do is ferment this until it becomes like this sort of like pungent pineapple flavored drink that gets served with lots of limon and salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep that. I'll put it in a bowl aside from the rest of this. I'm like, where do I put it right now? Here we go. I'm gonna put it in this little, I'm like keeping all my plastic to-go containers from restaurants that I've been to and giving food to friends in these containers. We'll figure that part out later. All right, so now I have my whole pineapple here, and all I do is cut through straight down the center, and then I lay that flat. So I have, again, another really flat surface, and then I cut down to create quarters. And I don't know if you can see this from the camera, but I can see here that this part of the pineapple is a lot more golden than the other parts of the pineapple. So like from here, this section is more ripe. So I'll probably end up breaking that one down. And so all I want to do here is I want to just cut at an angle here. So I have a nice flat hand on the top of my pineapple, and I'm just going to cut the core out. So this is all I'm cutting out here. This is going to be a part of my tepache. And again, I can do this with the other one. Just flat hand, cut that core out, and remove that. And so then you'll have another flat surface to work on here. If this is really thick, if you have a large pineapple, you could fillet this or stand it up and cut it lengthwise like I just did, so you can get smaller cubes out of it. And then you want to bear claw your hand again, cut these about 1/4 inch slices out of it. And then you want to turn your slices, bear claw, and do a 1/4 inch dice. And if it's like squishing around everywhere, you can sharpen your knife, or you can do a few less pieces at a time. Ooh, there we go. Probably should sharpen my knife. And sharpening your knife is actually something that you should do quite often. Almost, you know, at the kitchen, we sharpen our knives almost every single time that we use them, which is like almost every day. So I have my pineapple here that is going to be, some of it will go into the saute pan with my jackfruit, So I'll reserve a little bit that will go as a garnish. So that'll go on top of my taco as a garnish. And I'm using just here 1/4 of a pineapple for this amount of jackfruit. If you really love the pineapple bits in here, you can definitely add more. But this part of the jackfruit, of the pineapple is gonna go into my jackfruit. So I have my garnish, which are gonna be these like really pretty, vibrant, yellow color pieces of pineapple. And if you wanted your garnish to look even longer, like I know what's more traditionally seen on tacos al pastor are like thin, what you call like rebanadas, like you could cut like a rebanada like that, or you could cut, I don't know what the term is for rebanadas in English, but like a sliver, something like that. And then this is more like a sliced piece of pineapple that you could add. And so the idea is like, this is like what's traditionally seen as a garnish on, tacos al pastor that are like typically street tacos, but it also indicates to the eater that this dish has pineapple in it, so they know what they're kind of about to bite into. All right, so let's come back to our jackfruit. And hopefully I don't have any burnt pieces. Ooh, borderline, but this is nice and crispy. Check out that nice crispy texture right there. So I probably was away from this for just slightly too long, but actually, I just avoided burning that, but it looks nice and crispy. But that's the crispy texture that you're looking for throughout all the jackfruit. So right now it's only on the bottom, and so which is why you want to kind of stir the pot almost, right? Like mix it up so that you get the crispy bits on the top, and then you get these pieces that haven't touched the hot surface on the bottom, and just keep that moving. So this is still going to take a few more moments to cook. I'm going to turn on my comal back here, just so it's preheated and waiting for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about tortillas, although I'm not going to do tortillas hechas a mano, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different brands that I use. And then I'm going to show you the tortilla that I'm using for today. So let me go ahead and grab that from the fridge. Let me grab my masa. So one thing that I've learned over the years is that not all masa is created equal. So what we see more than anything, even here in LA, in our like street taco scene, is, these white corn tortillas that are very, I don't know what the right word is, that are just not that great quality, right? You typically see them like they're stacked 2 in a taco, maybe they're dunked in a little bit of oil and crisped on a plancha. But if they're just not cooked enough, they get cold really easily, or they break really easily. And so that quality of tortilla is one that I've tried to avoid over the years, actually. And so at home, I'll either have masa harina that's ready to go, and this is a white corn masa harina that I have at home. And this brand is Gold Mine, which is one of the vendors that is in the online resources guide. And this masa harina is organic, which oftentimes goes hand in hand with this term of non-GMO corn, which means it's good quality corn that honestly you can taste. You can taste the difference. Like if you were to get is it not guerrilla taco? It is guerrilla tortillas, right? And compare and like make a tortilla out of this masa, you'll immediately be able to taste the difference. And also nothing compares to Guerrero. That's right. I'm like guerrilla. I'm thinking of guerrilla taqueria. Guerrero. So you can taste the difference. But also nothing compares to a handmade tortilla. Hecha a mano is always the best. And another really good alternative, which is available in our in the kits that we're selling in our starter pack, is this Bob's Red Mill. And this is now being sold at Northgate. Like my mom buys this, which is amazing. And this is a golden corn flour. And so, the main thing with masa harina is that it should say masa harina if you're new to the tortilla making game at home. And what it means is it's different than a cornmeal or a corn flour, and that this corn has gone through the process of nixtamal. And what nixtamal does is it soaks the corn in an acidic mixture made of like limestone or calcium, which in Spanish most people just say cal. And what that does is it, you know, you bring the temperature of the liquid, which is like water and cal, water and limestone, up to almost a boiling point, turn off the heat, let that corn soak in there, sometimes mostly overnight. And then the next day draining all of that out and giving the corn a very, very rigorous rub. And that it'll remove the exterior skin of the corn. And so it will make it so that it's easily digestible for us to eat and more nutritious. And so you want to get something that is nixtamal. And so then this process has already gone through the nixtamal, or this corn has already gone through that process. And then it's then dehydrated again and ground up so that we can easily make this at home. All this takes is some hot water and a little bit of salt if you like adding salt to your tortillas. And I also like to add a little bit of oil just to make them a little bit more pliable. Some people are just diehard water and corn, nothing else. So whatever you prefer in your tortillas is best. And then I'm going to be using actually a pre-made tortilla. I know a lot of us have pre-made tortillas at home. And so my go-to pre-made tortilla is made by a vendor here in Los Angeles. It's local to LA. I don't think they sell out of LA just yet. Or actually, I think they do, but not out of California. And it's Kernel of Truth Organics. And they sell their tortillas, their non-GMO organic corn. This is US grown corn as well. And they sell their tortillas out of Cookbook, which is a store in Highland Park and Echo Park, Sarah's Market in City Paris, and Grassroots Market in South Pass, and maybe a few others that I don't know about, but I know that those are their main go-tos. And so their tortillas are just corn and water. And they seriously are the best tortillas out there right now. The masa, the blue corn masa that we use for Todo Verde is all made with by Kernel of Truth. Let me give my jackfruit a little turn here. And so this is definitely a good tortilla if you are just wanting to have something in the fridge ready to go. And I recommend that, you know, especially right now, since we're not going to the grocery store as often, what you could do is have a few in your fridge. Like I have a little Ziploc bag that I keep my tortillas in. I usually have like at least 10 at a time or so. And then I have the rest in the freezer. Tortillas freeze really well. Even handmade tortillas freeze pretty well. And then you can thaw them out in the fridge and warm them up as needed. So just a quick little FYI. The same way that you can freeze tamales, which I know a lot of people do over the, you know, after the holiday season, you can also freeze your tortillas. All right, so any questions? I'm gonna start getting all my other ingredients to start to assemble my taco. I didn't make a salsa de aguacate, but I'm just gonna do avocado, a little bit of onion, some cilantro, and get ready for my jackfruit, which is getting there. And I'll come back and show you in a second.
Jocelyn, would you mind showing us the first organic masa harina that you were telling us about?
Sure, absolutely. So the first one here is Golden Mine. And so that one is a white corn. And then I have a golden corn Bob's Red Mill. And you could also pick up Macienda is another really good one that you can buy online and sometimes at health food stores. And there's going to be a lot more coming out. Like right now, there's a big movement in Mexican food generally, and also in heirloom corn. So now people are starting to really get into this like heirloom corn game, which is really interesting because it's becoming more popular in the US and not as easily accessible in Mexico, which is where people are getting the corn, which is really weird. I've read some articles about that, and I hope that it also creates a shift in Mexico. And like most good corn grows in like southern regions of Mexico, like Chiapas and further down south.
Jocelyn, what do you think about the Manteca brand?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't mention them, but I would not recommend maseca. Maseca is not tasty. It's not, it's usually GMO corn. Um, most chefs who like work in Mexican food always like are anti maseca. So if you have maseca, if that's all you have, okay. But if you are able to get your hands on a better quality corn product, that's much better. And it's interesting because my mom actually has used maseca for years, and she's bought Guerrero tortillas for years. Actually, that's the stuff I grew up eating. And now that I've been getting more and more over the years into like the corn that I'm using, or the tortillas or the masa, and using kernel truth, she's like, this is the corn that I grew up eating in Mexico. Like, this tastes real. But I think over the years, she just got used to eating things like maseca and Guerrero tortillas and all these other like kind of generic like Mission and all these people who are just like mass producing, but add fillers and preservatives to their items to keep them shelf stable for a longer period of time, is not good. I actually went to a presentation that Rick from Colonel Chus did late last year, and he had two tortillas in his hands, and they were both they were cooked, but they were still like the pre-made tortillas. And he had like I can't remember what the brand was. You know, he had Colonel Truth and he had the other one, and he like bunched them up in his hand and like really like, you know, try to get it like super into a little ball. And then he opened his hands, and this tortilla, which was the competitor, like crumbled up. It was like trash. And the Colonel Truth one, it looked a little funky, but like it slowly started to like open back up to be like a tortilla again. And it's because the other one has so many like fillers and things in there that like if you do bend it, that's why they break easily too. Because all the other fillers are they have like binders and all this crazy stuff in there. It's just not the best corn. What you should see on the label of anything that you purchase is literally like corn. I'm gonna see what this one says. Organic corn, hydrated lime. Organic white corn, trace of lime. That's all you should see on any of these packages. It's kind of like I do food demos with kids at different schools across LA, not right now, but I have. And I'll show them two varieties of peanut butter. One will be Jif, and the other one will be like a natural peanut butter. And I'll show them the label, and the Jif has like palm oil, sugar, canola oil, peanuts. It has like 10, 12 ingredients, and then I'll show them the label of the natural peanut butter, and it says peanuts, salt. That's it. So that's what you want. That's what you're looking for in most things that you buy. I prefer to buy things that have as few ingredients as possible. I even like my nut milks that I purchase, or oat milk. I get everything unsweetened, no vanilla. I don't want any of it. I just want the oats in the water. I just want the almonds in the water, as few ingredients as possible. So let's come back here to our, and I'm saying few ingredients as possible, not like I don't like flavored food, but because I like to add everything myself. So if I want it to be sweet, I'll add my own pure organic maple syrup. If I want it to taste like chocolate, I'll add my own cacao. I don't need to buy your chocolate milk, you know? So not because I don't like flavor, but because I don't want all the things that they need to use to preserve that. So you can see here that our jackfruit is still browning, but at this point, it becomes your, ooh, look, I love these like burnt pieces like that. It's not really burnt, but that looks so good. So this is your personal preference at this point. You could eat the jackfruit here at this point, and you can see that it's slowly reduced down, like it's not as full the pan as it was at the beginning. But I like my jackfruit extra crispy, so I'll keep cooking this for a little while longer, keeping an eye on it. But if you're like, oh, I'm ready to eat this now, it's like, it has some crispy bits, but it's still kind of like juicy. I mean, it'll still be juicy because it has all that juice and the fat from the oil, but you can keep it going for a little bit longer if you want. I like my jackfruit really crispy. So I have a comal here that is preheating, And I have my tortilla that I'm gonna add in just a moment. And let me grab my avocado, my cilantro.
Jocelyn, 2 questions. Did you throw any pineapple in the skillet, and how long will the jackfruit keep in the fridge?
Yes, okay. So good looking out. I have not added my pineapple yet, and I need to. So yes, whoever said that, you're totally on point. I have my pineapple hanging out in the wings right here, ready to go in there. So this is a perfect time to add it. And then the other question I forgot already. The pineapple and the...
How long will the jackfruit keep in the fridge?
That's right. So the jackfruit will keep in the fridge for at least a good week or so. I've actually made jackfruit for an event, and I had another vendor at the kitchen who was like, oh, you know, because we didn't sell all of it. And he's like, I'll take it home and I'll make stuff out of it. Just so we didn't have food waste, we distribute it to other vendors at the kitchen. And like 2 weeks later, he's like, oh, I just had your jackfruit this morning with blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, that jackfruit's like 2 weeks old. And he's like, it's still good. It's still good. So, you know, I would say to err on the side of caution and eat it after, you know, 7 days feels right. But he was probably eating it like 14 days later, and he said it was still good. Also, jackfruit freezes really well. So if you only eat some of this now, you could definitely freeze the remaining bits of the jackfruit.
And could you repeat the brands of some of the store-bought tortillas that you would recommend?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the ones that I stick to mostly are Kernel of Truth, although there are some brands that are coming up. Like I know Hacienda is starting to sell their, they have like a tortilla press that they sell now, because before they just used to sell masa, but now they're actually selling like tortilla presses, and there's other brands that are coming up. The only thing is that they're mostly available at health food stores. So like you can go to Whole Foods, for example, and get like a good quality tortilla that's like non-GMO. They're not always super good, all the different brands. I can't think of one off the top of my head that I super like. Because I honestly only buy Kernel of Truth. That's like my main tortilla vendor that I support. Mostly because like, I don't know if Hacienda is a POC owned business. Like the video that they did of like demoing how to make tortillas was not a Mexican person at all. So, but I know the owners of Kernel of Truth. They're from LA. They're from the East Side. They've been making tortillas for a lot of years. Like it's in their veins, you know? So it's like, these are the people that I want to give my money to when it comes to masa and tortillas. All right. So I have that pineapple in there. I'm gonna let that work in there for a moment as I get my other ingredients ready. So I have my cilantro that I like to keep. This is what my fridge looks like. It's like all these vases with water and greens in them. So I'm just gonna bring my cutting board over. I have my little bit of pineapple that I'm using as a garnish for, I'm gonna make one taco for class right now. I'm gonna use a little avocado that I have here. Hopefully it looks nice inside. Oh, it's a little sad. Let me grab another one.
And Jocelyn, where can you get the Kernel of Truth tortillas? Do they have it available on an online site or in stores?
Honestly, I'm not sure if during COVID they switched to selling directly to consumer online or not. This one's much nicer. But you could buy them in LA at Cookbook Market, in Echo Park and Highland Park, at Sarah's Market in City Terrace, and also at Grassroots, which is where I actually buy them in South Pasadena. So I have my avocado here, and I'm just gonna take it out of the skin and give it a nice slice. Remove any of these like little funky bits here. I've been getting my produce from Imperfect Produce, and so things sometimes look a bit funky, or they sometimes send me a ton of things at once. Like I ordered just a pound of jalapenos, and they, I kid you not, sent me like 40 jalapenos in a box a couple weeks ago. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do with all these jalapenos? So I put them all in the comal and roasted all of them. And when you roast them, they obviously like, they're more pliable, so you can like stuff them in a container. And so I have a ton of frozen jalapenos in my fridge right now that I use to make salsas like throughout the week. So I have my avocado. Let me grab a little bit of onion. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge onion and garlic fan. I actually don't use onion and garlic for most of our Todo Verde dishes. Only our tinga and our mole have onion and garlic in them. There are some dishes in the book that require onion and garlic, because I felt like, oh, if I don't add it, I think people will be like missing some of the flavor. But for most dishes, you don't really miss it. I mean, this al pastor is really good and it doesn't have any onion and garlic, but you're welcome to add it. For this dish, I just cut it like a really thin dice here as a garnish, and it does provide a little bit of crunch. If you don't eat onion and garlic, you could add some radish to it that you just like thinly dice up. So for the recipe, I usually use a red onion, but I have a yellow onion, so I'm just going to use that. And I'm just going to make a little super thin slice out of it, and then I'll dice it up just to have a nice little crunchy fresh point on the top of my taco. And I'm almost ready to garnish the whole thing. And if you were making a salsa, there is a salsa de tomatillo that's in the book. If you were making the salsa, a salsa de aguacate, I should say, it's really easy. All you need is some ripe avocado. Even if your avocado isn't 100% ripe, it still works because I throw it in the blender with a few fire roasted tomatillos. If you didn't have that, like technically I could throw like this really ripe avocado that I have here in the blender with some of those pre-roasted jalapenos that I have in the freezer, some lemon juice, a little bit of water to loosen it up, and some salt, some cilantro, and that would be a perfectly good salsa. All right, let me throw my tortilla on here. Let me give my jackfruit a mix. And this will feed about 4 people. Although when I make this, you know, my partner and I go pretty hard on these tacos and eat quite a few. This will be at least, yeah, like, you know, 2 different meals. But if you serve it with sides like rice, beans, or, you know, anything else, it'll be even more filling. And you can have a few more meals out of it. I actually have some beans in the fridge that I can just warm up and serve on the side. And one other, just, it's a random kind of off topic point, but something that is super helpful for any home cooks out there is I have an Instapot. If you don't have an Instapot, it's a total game changer. I use it to cook beans. So beans that would be like soaked overnight, and then you drain the liquid out and you put them in a pot again, and then you cook them for 1 to 2 hours on the stove. In an Instapot will literally cook in less than 40 minutes. It's so insane. I just saw somebody's head turn. Was that Rosie? She's like, what? But yes, an Instapot is amazing. You can cook brown rice, which typically takes like 40 minutes, in like 12 minutes. Everything, because of the pressure in the Instapot, cooks much faster. They're not super expensive. And also my friend Nisha has this book here, one more book I'll share for today, called Vegan Instapot. It's another book that you should definitely check out. And so she has a lot of different recipes in here, from like coconut yogurt to cheeses to a variety of different things, but it also gives times, like if you're cooking beans, brown rice, white rice, like everything, it gives cook time. And so I really, really love the Instapot because, oh, I'm forgetting about my tortilla. It's going overboard here. I'm gonna throw some water on here. to kind of make sure it doesn't get hard. There we go. If that happens and you're cooking multiple tortillas, once it starts to get hard, you could always stack it in between a few other tortillas and the steam will kind of get it pliable again. All right. Let me actually get this one. All right, so I have my tortilla here and I'm going to grab a little bit of my jackfruit. Just still sizzling up here. I'm gonna put the heat on low and I'm gonna let it keep cooking even more. But at this point, it's really ready to go. I just really like crispy jackfruit. So I'm just adding some of that too. And this is a 6-inch tortilla. If you're making handmade, they might be a little smaller. Unless you have that magic touch. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of that pineapple garnish, just a few pieces so people know that they're eating pineapple there. If you had the rebanada, you could just add it on the side. I'm gonna add a little bit of my avocado actually next. I was gonna do the onion, but especially when I'm using the red onion, I like it on top because it's like a nice contrasted color. So I'm gonna add my slices of avocado here, a little bit of onion, pick one out. And then for the cilantro, I like to use like the whole leaves of cilantro versus mincing. I know in the book I minced it because I wanted it to look like a street taco that you would find somewhere in like Mexico or something. But you could mince it up or you could just add the leaves of cilantro, which gives it like a more delicate touch. And so there's our taco del pastor. Any questions coming up for folks as I get ready to take a bite? And anybody who's cooking along, I'd love to know. It looks like Jen is cooking. I think Jen might be the only person cooking, or is there anybody else out there cooking? It does look super yummy. Check that out. That's still that brick color of the jackfruit. You have some onions, some cilantro, some pineapple pieces. The avocado gives it a nice creamy texture. Again, you could make that quick salsa. And I just like went, that was weird, but whatever. The head tilt. So some people are always like, do you tilt the taco and then have everything spill out of it? Or you always tilt to the taco. The taco is in charge. So head tilt, eat taco. Mm-hmm. I took a really big bite. It's so good. I do like the onion in here because it does provide that crunchy texture. I have some crispy bits of jackfruit in there. The avocado is nice and creamy and it helps to create a nice balance of textures. And obviously cilantro is always super yummy in any dish. It's super good.
You cook jackfruit for, and how long would you fire roast the tomatillo for, the avocado salsa?
Yeah, so the jackfruit cooks for at least 20-25 minutes if you have it on like a medium heat. I like to cook it even longer but at least to that point where the flavors really like meld together. And then if you want it even crispier, you can keep going with it. And then for the tomatillos, you would fire roast them until they're cooked through essentially. So it could take about 10 to 15 minutes or so, like cook them on one side. You could cook them directly on the flame on your stove and use tongs to flip them, or you could put them on a skillet and let them sear on one side and you'll start to see that they turn from like this really bright, vibrant green to a more opaque, you know, deep color of green. And when they're squishy, because at first they're really firm, like a underripe tomato, they're really firm. And then as they cook, they get really soft and squishy. Sometimes they even pop and some of the tomatillo liquid will ooze out into your skillet or onto your stove. Fun times cleaning after that, but it's a part of the nature of the game, you know? And so once you see the searing or the fire roastedness on both sides, and that it's pretty squishy and it's that deeper green shade of color throughout, that's when your tomatillos are done.